This particular lecture, I'm going to talk about org level security. So this is something which is about securing your entire org. So it defines who can log in into your org, from where, and under what conditions. When these things are cleared, only then we talk about object level security, field level security, and record level access. So the first thing which comes in picture is the password policy. And when you go to login.salesforce.com and you start giving your username and password, this is the point where org level security starts coming into the picture. So there are certain password policies defined, and to look at them, you can go to setup and under quick find, look for password policies. So password policies under security. So this is the page. So it sets your policies for the password of your entire org, not just for one user. So if you want to set it for one user, you can do it as well on the profile level. But if you want to set it for the entire org, this has to be done right here. And here I'm saying that within 90 days, user has to reset their password because it will expire. Okay, one of the good security feature. Then I enforce that my last three passwords, they should not be same, and I should set up new passwords. So the last three password would be remembered by the org and it won't let you set the same password. Then the length of the password. So it says that the length has to be within 5 to 50 characters. So you can decide what length you want. So let's say I want it to be 12. Then comes the important part, which is the complexity requirement, and it says that it must include alpha and numeric character. If you want to make it much more complex, you can ask them to include numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and special characters. Okay, and then comes the password question requirement. So again, it can set that the password question requirement cannot contain the actual password. Then there is another point where you want to set the maximum invalid attempts possible. So that you can also set, and that is the limit 3, 5, 10, whatever you want to set. Okay. And then comes the lockout effective period. So this is the time duration in which the user won't be allowed to make the next attempt if their maximum attempts are exhausted. Okay, so if you set it to forever, then you need a system admin to reset it. Then only it would work. If it is 60, 30, and 15, then that duration must be respected. Only then user would be allowed to make the next attempt. There are some other settings like require a minimum 1 day password lifetime. If you enable this, your password can only be reset once in 24 hours. And then there is a setting called obscure secret answer for password reset. So when you set the secret answer, do you want to hide it or do you want it to appear in the plain text field format, so that you can decide. So in the password policies, now I have made some changes and make it most restrictive. With this setting, the org level security would increase really high because passwords are getting stronger and user needs to set them in every 30 days, and the user won't be able to set the same password as the last 24 passwords. And the length is really high, which is 50, and it must include number, uppercase, lowercase, and special characters. And it would have only 3 login attempts, and lockout period is forever. So this is really a very high security settings, and these level of high settings are also not even recommended, because that, although it's good for your company, but also really put user in pain in setting up the password length up to 50. So it's good to relax them. So this is the first thing in the org level security, and let's continue to talk about the next one, which is identity verification. To continue our discussion on the org level security, next topic we are going to discuss is the identity verification. Now, in the identity verification, one common thing to discuss is MFA. And before we talk about MFA, let's talk about activation. So under security, you find one activation page, and it defines which user has come to your org under which IP and it defines when is the log created. So you can see that on 15th of October 2025, the first log get created for this particular IP. And since then, I'm using the same IP, and that is why there is no new log created for my user. If I want to delete this particular log, I won't be able to do it because currently I have logged in with the same IP and under the same log, my session has been activated. Now, if I want to look at from which IPs user has logged in, I have that option available in the user detail page as well. So if I go to my user detail page under the login IP, under the login history, I can see the login time and the IPs. Here I can see that I have always used one particular IP to log in into my system, and it gives a little more detailed view of it. All right, now let's get back to the activation page over here. Now let us open another tab and use login.salesforce.com. And we have this password policies and all discussions done. And when I click on login, it takes me to this verify your identity page, and it has sent me an email with a verification code. And with this verification code, I would be able to log into the system. Now I have two options. One is I uncheck this box, don't ask again, or I keep this box checked. Whenever I am working on my own system, I can mark this checkbox checked, don't ask again. But when I know I have logged into someone else's system and I'm using someone else's laptop or computer to log into my org, I should uncheck it so that anytime an attempt is made to log in, a verification code is asked, even if the password is known to the person. So at this point, I know the password, and what I'm going to do is let me just look at the verification code. Okay, I have the verification code with me 563785. With this verification code, I'll go ahead and use don't ask again option and verify my system. Now I have logged in into the system, and if I go to the activation screen and refresh it, I can see that this time it says that the challenge has been completed. So this is the time when I have completed the challenge, and this is the time Salesforce org has recognized the user and the challenge is already completed. So next time when the traffic comes from this particular IP from this for this particular user, it won't ask for any verification code. So let's try that out. Now if I log out and give my username and password, let's use login.salesforce.com and give my username and password. It is giving another option to register my phone or not, and I say I don't want to register my phone, but it is not asking for any verification code. Why? Because again, the traffic has come from the same login IP and the challenge is already completed, and this is why there is no need to challenge again. Now with this, we have understood the importance of that small checkbox, don't ask again, and the verification code screen. Now there are other ways in which we try to verify the identity, and the another way which is MFA. MFA verification can be done at the org level. It can also be done at the profile level, permission set level, and the connected app level. Here, I am going to talk about how you can do it at the org level. In order to do that, we will move to the screen called identity verification. And in identity verification, you will find there is a checkbox under multiple factor authentication. There is a checkbox which says require multiple factor authentication for all direct UI login to your Salesforce org. Once you check this box, all the users in your org must go through multi-factor authentication for any time they log in through the Salesforce UI. Now, if you select the next checkbox, it offers you not just Salesforce Authenticator, but different verification method to verify your identity. With this, I'll save this particular setting And when I do this, next time when I go to login.salesforce.com, it will ask me to verify my identity. This time when I come to login.salesforce.com and fill in my username and password and click on the login button. So what I see is that it asks for a verification method, and for verification there are various options. So I can see a couple of options here because I enabled them. Well, I'll go with the Salesforce Authenticator mobile app because in my mobile I have Salesforce Authenticator already installed. And what I need to do next is I need to open that application, Salesforce Authenticator, and then I click on add an account. And then I can see in my mobile that I need to type in these two word phrase here, and then I can connect it with my mobile device. So account has been added and I have successfully verified my identity. So here I am. So this is how I can enable multi-factor authentication. Now, if I want to bypass the multi-factor authentication for a certain group of users, I can create a permission set. And in this permission set, I'll just name it bypass MFA. In this permission set, all I need to do is assign one system permission, and the name of this system permission is Wave multi-factor authentication for exempt user. So what I'll do is I'll just edit this and enable this permission for those users who are assigned with this permission set. And next, what I'm going to do is assign this permission set for my user. Now, since I have this permission set assigned to my user, I'm expecting that multi-factor authentication should not run. So I just log out and log in again. And when I do so, multi-factor authentication is just bypassed and I can simply log into the org. So with this, we have understood that identity verification MFA can be checked at the org level. You can also check it at the profile level or using permission set and even as the connected app. To give some more information around it, if you go to the user and look at the user's profile, I'll just show you. In the profile level as well, since this is the standard profile, you can see the option for waiving the multi-factor authentication for exempt users. So this option is available at the profile level as well as at the permission set level. Now, important thing is that here the connected app level, although I do not have this connected app in here, but once you enable the multi-factor authentication, it comes under, if I go to the session settings, I'll just show you that multi-factor authentication comes under high assurance. So in connected app, whenever the high assurance is required for authentication, multi-factor authentication becomes one of the option. So it has the role even at the connected app level. All right, with this, we have covered multi-factor authentication process, which is important for org level security. Now, I can go ahead and talk about the third one, which is the trusted IP ranges. So we are talking about the trusted IP ranges, and this is again a big part of org level security. Now, to set the trusted IP ranges, in the quick find box, go to network access. The first question comes up is, what is this and why are we doing it? Well, you are just telling your org that whenever the traffic comes from this particular IP ranges, do not ask for verification code. Please note, multi-factor authentication is still valid. Just the verification code would be skipped. So that part would be skipped. So here I know that for me, if I go to my user, I can see that mostly the traffic is coming from this IP, right? So I can basically add this IP to the trusted source. So I can say when the start range is this, or I can just keep it as 225 and 220. Okay, that means the traffic is coming from my home only, and I can keep it under the trusted IP ranges. So whenever the login happen from this particular IP, it won't ask me for any verification code anytime in future. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go here and use one incognito window and then use login.salesforce.com with my username and password. And if I click on login, it will go for multi-factor authentication, but you can see that it has skipped the verification part. Why? Because again, the traffic is coming from this particular IP, which is added to the trusted IP ranges. So this is an important point that whenever you have trusted IP ranges enabled, the IPs don't require any active verification codes. Okay. Now with this, let us move to the next one, which is login flows. Login flows is another feature which is added by Salesforce where it allows the user to add their custom logic. If you look at the other logics, they are predefined mechanisms from Salesforce and you do not have much to modify over there. But in the login flows, you have the opportunity to customize it as per your org needs. So for that purpose, let's go to setup, and under setup, first thing we will do is we will make sure that in process automation settings, we have enable lightning runtime for flows checked over here. If not, please check it and save your changes. So when it comes to login flows, all you need to do is go to setup and in the quick find box, type in login flows, and this is your login flow screen. Here you can create your new login flow and your custom logic. It can come from a screen flow or it can come from an Apex. So if you want to use Apex, use Visualforce page, and behind the Visualforce page, you can have Apex defined. But here we will go and start with writing some logic with the help of a flow. Now I can use the screen flow here, but I do not have any flow in my org. So what I'll do is I'll first go to flows and create a new flow, which would be a screen flow. And it's a simple flow where I'm adding a screen. And then I can add some radio buttons. And then I can create multiple choices. So I have a question and I have 4 options for it. And what I want is whenever the administrator log into the org, he should answer this question, and only if the answer is right, then only he can proceed ahead, else not. Now the screen is ready. Another thing I can do here is I can use the decision element where I will check for right or wrong. And when it is right, in that case, I know that the selected option should be this one. And I'll show up a screen for the right answer. But if it is a wrong answer, I can select this screen saying that this is a wrong answer. And in that case, it should connect back to this element. Let me save it, activate this, go to flows, login flows, create a new one based on the flow, and this is my screen flow, and I want to make it run for an admin user with the profile system admin and give it a name, security check for admin. All right, this is done. So now I'm going to log out and then I will log in again. So when I log in, it asks me for these questions and these are my answer, and it is mandatory to answer it. If I don't, it will ask me that please select a choice. If I select the wrong answer, it will show up that it is a wrong answer and it will bring me back to this screen. If I select the right answer, it will show that this is the right answer and I can click on finish and I can log in. So it defines the purpose of login flows. Now there are a few important points we should remember with respect to login flows. And here we should understand that when the user log in, first thing Salesforce is doing is to authenticate the user with the help of password and then MFA. Then Salesforce looks at what is the profile of the user, and based on that, the login flow runs. Okay, if there is no login flow defined for the user profile, then no login flows runs. So if you clear the login flow, then you will get the full session access. If you don't clear it, you would be stuck. Okay, so this is important to note that one profile can have only one login flow. All right, with this, let us move to the next one, which is login access controls, and they are defined at the profile level. So now we will talk about login access controls and login IP ranges, and both are defined at the profile level. Okay, so if I go to my user and enter details, I can see that I have system admin profile assigned to my user. Well, I won't be able to modify much over here because it is a system admin profile, which is a standard profile and comes out of the box. So what should I do at this point is I should clone this profile and create a custom system admin profile. When I do that, it gives me a flexibility to modify the permissions of this profile. So at this point, you can see that I have a detailed view of the profile. There is another view possible for the profile, and to look at that view, go to user management settings and enable enhanced profile user interface. When you do that, this is the new view of your profile. Now here I have two important sections with respect to the org security, which are login hours and login IP ranges, and we are going to talk about it. So in the login hours, you define the range or the timings in which your users with this particular profile get into the system. So let's say on Sunday, they are only allowed to log in from 9 a.m. to 12. That's it. No other range is possible. So here you can see that it reflects that on Sunday, possible login hours are only 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The timing which you select over here comes in accordance with the company information, is in accordance with the company time zone. So if I go to the company information, I can see that it is working on Pacific daytime, and this is why what ranges it reflects here, they are also in Pacific daytimes. So this is a setting which is on the profile level and it is not available at the permission set level. Let's get back to the profile and then talk about another permission, which is about login IP ranges. So here you define those IP ranges from where this particular user, or from where the users for this profile can basically logs into the system. If anyone tries to log outside the IP ranges defined over here, he or she won't be able to log into the system. So all this works together. Now, since we have discussed quite a few security features, it is also important to understand how all these features work together. So all these features are actually complementary to each other. So first thing is that user comes to the page and provide his username and password, and this is where password policies comes in picture. Then what Salesforce does is Salesforce check the login hours for that particular user based on the profile, and if the login hours are outside the ranges, then the login is blocked But if it is within the login hours range, then login is enabled. And further, it checks for the IP ranges. In the IP ranges, again, if it is outside, login is blocked. But if it is within the IP ranges, then in that case, it does allow the user to log in. And if it does allow, then it checks whether that IP is defined in the trusted IP range or not. And if it does, then it skips the identity verification. But if it is outside, then it requires the verification code. By any chance, if the MFA is enabled, then even the MFA works. Okay. And once the MFA works, then comes the login flows. Once the login flow is cleared, and then your login is allowed if no other restriction is applied. All right. So this is the sequence in which your org security is working. So now let's move to the next one, which is session security. In session security, you can define the session timeout. You can talk about browser IP locking, HTTPS only access, etc. So to look at session settings, you can go to quick find box and start typing session settings. Under security, you find session settings page. The first section is session timeout, where you define the timeout value for your session. Now, if I keep it 2 hours, then, which is the default value, then if there is no activity for the next 2 hours, then in that case, the session will expire. And here, there are 2 flags within this section. One is to disable session timeout warning pop-up, which means if it is enabled, if this checkbox is true, in that case, there won't be any warning pop-up. Then the other one is to force logout on session timeout, which says that if your session is expired, all your pages would go back to the login screen with a message that your session is expired. But if you keep it disabled, in that case, the session is expired. Even then, you will see the actual page. It won't take you to the login page. But if you click on a button and do a new action, in that case, it will kick you out to the login page. Now let's move to the next section, which is session settings. It talks about log sessions to the IP address from which they originate. So IP addresses, if they are changed during the mid of the session, then if you want to expire the session or log the user out, in that case, you can enable this feature. Generally, we do not enable it because nowadays, changing the IP in the mid of the session is a very common thing. And we do it as part of VPN load balancer, where if the traffic is high on one gate, we try to redistribute it. And in that case, IPs change, and that changes in the mid of the session. IPs can also change if you are connected with the telecommunication network and signals changes from one tower to another tower while traveling. Even then, the IPs are changed. So we generally keep it disabled. Okay. And then we look at the caching. So caching is something which is related to the browser. So if caching is enabled, your browser works as a temporary memory. So you can enable caching and autocomplete on login page, and enable security and persistent browser caching to improve the performance. So these features also you can control from here. And then clickjack protection. It is an important one. So what is clickjack protection? Let's understand it over here. So clickjack protection. So let's understand what is clickjack. Clickjack is a malicious technique where an attacker tricks a user into clicking something different from what they think they are clicking. And it is basically called as hijacking their clicks. So they intentionally want you to click at one particular button or something, and it does not work as you thought it would. Rather, something else is happening behind the scene. So here is an example. So there is a hacker who creates a fake web page, and in the first look, it looks harmless. And there is a play video button over there, and you click on that video, and behind the scene, there is an invisible frame, iframe, that actually loads a sensitive page from Salesforce, and it submits an order or approve an opportunity, and so on. So these things can happen, right? And when the user clicks the visible button, their click is actually sent to the invisible Salesforce frame, approving or submitting something without their knowledge. And this is called UI redressing, misleading the user interface. So these protection stop your Salesforce page from being loaded inside another site's iframe unless explicitly allowed. And here is the feature where you control it. So it's recommended that you enable the clickjack protection. And then comes the lightning locker. Lightning locker is basically for Aura and LWC. Further, there are certain other settings which we can control from this particular page. like new user welcome email settings and so on. Now this is a page where admins mostly perform the setup when a new org is established or there are certain releases from Salesforce. One of the important setting is this, where you log the session to the domain in which they were first used. So basically Salesforce has multiple domains, and it's like I'm currently in this particular domain, and so this is the domain in which I have got the session ID. So that session ID, if it is stolen, in that case, anyone who would like to access with login.salesforce.com won't be able to perform any activity because I have logged the session to the domain in which they were first used. So this is one of the important setting. Another important thing which we should have talked about is the session security level. So there are two levels, one are standard and the other one is high assurance. So these all are the security levels, but if you define something as the high assurance, that high assurance can be used at other places for authorization purpose. So one of them is the MFA, which we have enabled, and it comes under high assurance, and by default it comes under high assurance. If you want to remove it, you can remove that as well, but let's keep it to high assurance and save our changes. All right, with this we have covered the security things. Now another thing is to understand that all the connections in Salesforce, whether it is Experience Cloud domain or your domain or login.salesforce.com or anything, everything requires HTTPS. So everything requires HTTPS protocol, and HTTP protocol is not acceptable. Even if you have used HTTP, it redirects to HTTPS. So here, if I use HTTP, it will redirect it to HTTPS. See, so everything would automatically redirect it to HTTPS because HTTP requests are blocked. With this, we have understand the org level security layer.